afternoon, folks. Got another BatRep for you. This time, Rommel. Late War, World War II action. We got the Americans and the Germans going at it once again. It's my first BatRep with Rommel. Hope you guys enjoy. I did this earlier in 2019, I believe. And there's a lot of stuff going on. It's a really fun game, and I hope you guys enjoy. So sit back, relax, and let's enjoy some Rommel action. So here's a look at the tabletop. Battlefield. Probably can't see the actual grids, and that might be a good thing, but we'll see. Now, first thing you notice on the table is these white dots, these white chits, basically, that I have deployed on the table. There's 5 of them. There's one here, one over here in this built-up area, and then we have one here, and then way over here in the back, we have another one. So there's 5 of these white chips in all. These are objectives, temporary objectives. This is, in fact, the German deployment zone. And if you look over here, you will see the blue line here indicates the German deployment zone. It's everything on this side of the blue line. Here we have some no man's land. And then on the red line, everything behind it over here, this is actually the American deployment zones. They have 3 squares in all here where they're going to deploy their troops. So anyway, getting back to these white markers, they are considered temporary objectives. And what that means is they stay on the table only a certain number of turns and they're removed. So the American basically has to hurry up and capture them before they're removed. Now, starting up here, the ones closest to the Americans, this one is removed at the end of turn 4. This one, turn 8. This one down here will be removed at turn 10. That's this one. And then the final ones in the back, you can see them. This one up here in the built-up area is removed in turn 16, and this one turn 12. So basically, the ones closer to the Americans will be removed sooner. It gives the Americans a chance to jump on those objectives as early as they can. Now, as far as the terrain, German rolled a 16 for their terrain pieces, and they went crazy with the woods and the mountains. You can't probably see the mountains, but they are here, and I'll show them in a second. Germans got a 16 for terrain, and the Americans rolled 20 for their number of terrain pieces to place. Now, starting up here on the corner, we've got a built-up area, and this is an objective for the Americans. Behind this, that blue marker up here, I don't know if you could see that, but that's a supply point. It's the only supply point for the Germans. So this area is a built-up area. We've got a bunch of woods ahead of that. There's 1, 2, 3 woods there, one over here. We do have some soft ground that the Germans placed right here, some marshy area. And we have another built-up area closest to the camera right here. Now these fields, incidentally, there's about 3 of them. There's one here, and there's a couple on the other side of the board. Those are there just for looks, as is this ruin. They don't count as anything other than open terrain. Also, we have a river here that the German placed on the board. It doesn't go far. It just comes straight in this way and does have a single bridge over it. The Americans placed that. So that might be difficult, maybe, for the Americans to get across. Again, that bridge will be key. In addition, there's also some woods areas up here, some of which the Germans also placed to slow the advance of the Americans and give cover to this objective here. We have a mountain here and some more woods back here in the corner that the Germans or the Americans placed to secure their supply point, which is this corner, once again, the red marker. But again, it's probably hard to see the mountains. That's about the only other piece of terrain placed. There's one here that the Americans placed, and there's 2 on the other side over here in no man's land. In addition, there is 2 right here in front of that forest. You can barely see them. These cigar box mats are pretty good. But there's one here and there's one here. So this is mountainous terrain. And maybe I'll alter the map a little bit for the camera's sake, for you guys watching, so you'll easily distinguish the mountains, because they are kind of blended in really well. Other than that, that's about it. Roads, of course, are assumed to exist throughout. You don't have to put actual roads down. Each square is a kilometer in distance, a kilometer across, so it's a lot of ground to cover. So that's a look at the terrain and the scenario. A little bit more about this scenario. Again, it is the evacuation scenario. Now, I see these objectives that are controlled initially by the Germans. I see them as supply points, gathering points, resource points, strong points even, that are where the Germans are concentrating as they withdraw from the area. They're evacuating, remember. So I've marked them with actual models of half tracks that are next to the actual white markers. Kind of looks good for the pictures. But again, there is 5 of them. The Americans have to capture 3 to gain a victory immediately. The battle goes 16 turns. Nightfall kicks in. And that's the battle. So let's see what happens. Let's take a look at the forces next, starting with the Germans. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the Germans. This is 90 points worth of Germans, 3 elements in total, which is the minimum for late war. Starting on the left of the barricades, we have an infantry element, or Kampfgruppe. It's made up of 2 battalions of infantry, 3 bases each. These are leg infantry, so they're not as mobile as other more motorized troops. In front of them and supporting the element is a battery of Stugs, which is the assault guns. And that's it. That's 3 units in that element. Now in front of them is the exact same thing. That is my second element, or Kampfgruppe. And on the other side, here's my quality troops. I'm probably going to use these guys as a reserve to counter any breakthroughs by the Americans. They're much more mobile. In the back, we have a battalion of Panzer Grenadiers. Of course, they're mounted in their armored half-tracks. 3 bases worth, that's a battalion. In front of them, we have some motorized infantry. 3 bases of them, that is a battalion. And finally, the coup de grace, we have a battalion of Panther tanks to spearhead any attacks we make. As a headquarters attachment, in other words, they're not part of any element, I have a battery of Nebelwerfers. Now, in the game, they're only useful when you attack. They can only support with their barrage for attacks you make. So that would be during your turn. They're no good on defense. So I imagine these guys will be supporting anything I do with my little reserve mobile force here. In addition, I bought 7 earthworks, or dug-in markers. There's 7 of them, so I can lay them around objectives early on in the battle and put my infantry in there. I also have, as represented by these 2 dice, 2 engineer markers. So probably later on I'll use them to dig some more earthwork markers, perhaps in the middle or back of the area of the battlefield I'm defending. That should work out pretty good. Again, this is 90 points right on the button. Let's see how good they do. So here we have the Americans, 110 points in all. Pretty big. It's basically 2 elements, which is the minimum for the American late war. And I got them separated by these boat counters. And to the left, we have their biggest element, which is an armored CC. And it's made up of 3 battalions, 1, 2, and 3, of armored infantry, as well as 3 tank battalions, basically your M4 Shermans. We got 3 of them. And they are supported by tank destroyer battalion, which is these 3 M10s. Now, they're actually M18s, but I'm using M10 models. It'll do. And finally, they have a recon battalion of Stuarts right here supporting them. And lastly, an attachment of some mobile artillery, a battery of M7, the Priest. So that's the armored CC. Pretty potent. They're the ones going to make the initial attacks and pick up those objectives. Now, on the right, the second element, more of a support role. It's made up of a battalion of tank destroyers, again, M18s, and 2 battalions of your standard infantry. These are motorized infantry. They're not leg, so they're not as slow as the leg troops. And to top it all off, I did buy these 3 boats to put them at exactly 110 points. So they're good to go. That is the American forces. Okay, folks, let's look at deployment real quick. On this side of the river, we have the German deployment zone, as I pointed out earlier. There's 2 infantry Kampfgruppe that are defending these front lines. The second element, I'll call them, are located over here. They got their Stugs, or assault guns, behind them in a reserve. They're going to fight. Well, they're dug in along the river, actually. They'll be engaging any Americans that try and cross that river by boats or by the bridge. The objective is right here. It's got a company of infantry dug in, And again, they are supported by their elements assault guns, which are in the back. Now, the first element, Kampfgruppe, are also likewise deployed in the front lines. They have all their men up here along this area. They're defending this objective with some dug-in infantry. They're supported on this side with 3 more companies of their infantry, and 2 more companies are backing them up. And their assault gun battalion is kind of held in reserve here. And as you can see over here, between these 2 lead elements, there is a gap wide open, suspiciously so. We'll see what happens. One thing about the river to point out is that no vehicles actually can cross this unless it's by the bridge. Now, if they have boats, which the Americans do, their infantry units will be able to cross that river. But the Germans are waiting for them with all these dug-in infantry. Now, looking to the back, right here, we've got from our third element, which is the mobile one with the Panzer Grenadiers, the Panthers, and the motorized infantry. Over here, we have the battalion of Panzer Grenadiers, as well as supported by one of their Panthers. They're hovering around this objective down here. They're also ready to be deployed as a reserve or a quick reaction force if something does actually break in up here. Keep in mind that in the center of the area, these 2 squares are mountainous. You can't really see the 3D effect here because the cigar box battle mat is so well done. It's kind of well hidden, but I do have these little lichen splotches sitting on the top. Maybe that'll help. Backing up the entire defense is the remainder of my armored Kampfgruppe or element. The remaining 2 Panthers are back here, as well as the entire battalion of motorized infantry. And also in reserve is the headquarters attachment, which is the Nebelwerfer. And these 2 objectives are still sitting here. Now, of course, keep in mind that way over here, that blue chip, that is the supply point for the Germans. So that's very critical to them. So that's the Germans. Now let's take a look at the Americans. Got a lot of stuff lined up here. That's kind of a lot of troops to be squished into 3 rows of squares. But there they are. This is the offensive. Now, let's see. Let's work over from this side here. On this side, they have their first RTC, basically an infantry force. And it's supported by 3 tank destroyers, which is a tank destroyer battalion. These guys, which is basically mostly infantry, your basic motorized infantry, they're going to basically be moving up in this direction, as you can see. All their troops are stationed here. These 2 units, keep in mind, are sitting on top of a mountain terrain area, and they have 3 more to their right. Now, if we look towards the middle and the far side, we're going to see a lot of troops here. For one thing, the 3 tank battalions, the tank destroyer battalion, as well as the battalion of Stuarts, which have the recon ability. We'll get into that when we start the battle. As well as the 3 battalions of armored infantry are all deployed along this area. And there's a big concentration here of the M4 Shermans, supported by the Stuarts leading the way. And it looks like they're going to be bypassing this mountainous area, which is right here, these 2 squares, and coming up in this direction. At least that's where their tanks are concentrated. So yeah, this second element is heavily deployed on this side, and most of their infantry, their armored infantry, are scattered over on this side in the fields. Remember, the fields are counted as open terrain. So it looks like they're going to be moving towards the river and see what happens. Maybe they're going to do some crossing. I suspect so. They do actually have some boats, so we shall see. So here's a look at the ops sheets for both sides. The Americans, they have the first turn. The basic game length is 16 turns, and they start off with 6 ops, as you can see by the 6 green dice. The Germans start off with 4 ops. They do not go first. Now, those 2 yellow chips on the German op sheet, that represents their 2 engineering counters they have. And, of course, the Americans have their 3 boats, which they can use, probably will use, to get across that river if it's going to prove difficult to do so across the bridge. So here's the look of the ops sheets. Okay, and with that, we're going to get right into the first turn. The Americans are up first. Let's see how well they fared. Okay, folks, finished turn one. That was the Americans. They have the first turn of the battle. I have smoke on the table to show where the fighting occurred. There was 4 squares that were contested. Over here, and over on the bridge as well. All in all, the Americans didn't fare too well. All their attacks were repulsed. In most cases, they did take losses. Germans suffered losses as well, especially in this area, the 1st Infantry Kampfgruppe that's defending this sector. Let's take a look. Let's get a close-up and show you guys what's been going on. Okay, on this end, the infantry RCT for the Americans did advance. They were supported in this case with an M18. They were all defeated and forced to withdraw. And as you can see, I've got them facing the opposite direction and pointing towards a corner in the square, which indicates they are tipped. They can't do any more for the rest of the turn. Well, until their next turn. That's what that's indicated by. And you can see these little dice pods in the back here that indicate losses. All these units here with dice behind them basically took a hit. This objective marker was also assaulted by 3 companies of infantry, which again were repulsed. This defense here by the Germans, they did originally have some earthworks. They're now gone. But you'll also notice that there's another company in here with them. Originally, it was just the one company. They played a tactic. They brought this company in to help them out. That helped out quite a bit. Looking towards the center, you could see all these Shermans and some Stuarts that had basically come through this gap, which was wide open, intentionally by the Germans, and the Americans came rumbling in. They have to pretty much bypass that river. They can't cross with their armor. There was some fighting in this square back here, and again, the Americans were repulsed. The Germans did take a loss. You could see some of those units that originally attacked retreated all the way back here. It included a Stuart, a company of infantry, and some Shermans. They were repulsed. And on the other side, as you could see by the bridge, there was 3 companies of infantry that came across, that assaulted. They were supported by a barrage from the M7 Priest, and quite a few tactics. I think the Americans played 3 tactics in all in this attack. Otherwise, they've been kind of conservative. They could not cause any damage to the Germans, who held out and still have their earthworks. So that's still a strongly defended position by the Germans. The Americans did, however, at the end of their turn in the marker phase, put down 2 boats, perhaps to help them cross with their infantry. So we'll see what happens. Let's see the next turn and see how the Germans respond. Okay, folks, the Germans just finished their turn. They started off, they rolled, I think, 6 dice in all for their ops. They didn't reset, but they rolled 6 dice for their ops, and they rolled 2 ones, which means they got 4 additional dice added to their ops supply. They weren't able to do much anyway, since they're in a defensive position and they don't really want to be too aggressive. Let the Americans come to them. They did reinforce this position, moved up some infantry into this location as well as around this objective. Remember, this objective will be removed in turn 4. They did launch an attack here against the lone Stuart company. They managed to destroy it. The Stuart, of course, as recon, has the ability to withdraw. It was unable to do so without overstacking and all these routes it could retreat to. And it was only basically this square, and that's it. And that square over here, they're already full. 3 units is the max per square, so it could not withdraw. The other squares were occupied by enemy. Now, it could have gone this direction into the mountains or into German territory, but to me, it just wasn't worth the risk of being isolated and being pretty much ineffective in the battle. So it took a chance, fought the battle, and it took a total of 3 hits, including a tank duel, which it had to fight because it was against another tank. So it was destroyed. So that was the end. And it's now occupied by a Stug, or assault gun, located right here, which also took 2 hits, remarkably. So this Stug took 2 hits as well. It's 1 more away from being just shattered. So that was remarkable. Both sides rolled a 6 in the combat. Anyway, there was also in a combat here, The Germans attacked from two directions, from this side with two Stug companies, and from the opposite side with a Stug company. That's from the second infantry Kampfgruppe over here. That was pretty much ineffective. They were outgunned, and the Shermans basically took no damage whatsoever except for that Stuart, which took a hit. And the Germans also took hits as well and were forced back. They were retreated back into these squares. So that was the end of that. It was totally ineffective. So that's all they got done. They're going into turn 3 with only 2 dice in their ops. The Americans are going in with 4, but of course they have the opportunity to reset and add additional dice to their ops supply. So we'll see what the Americans do in turn 3, folks. Hang in there. Okay, folks, turn 3 is complete. Again, that was the Americans trying to push through, especially in the center, and boy, were they successful on this turn. As you can see here, the American tanks did penetrate. They threw back the assault gun companies. The entire battalion actually was thrown back. As you can see, they're gone, and I'll show you them in a second, but also we have up here the Germans still holding the objective, and they're doing quite well. They are taking remarkably quite a few casualties, however. So let's see if they can keep that on the board for another turn and prevent the Americans from capturing it. Could be. Their turn is next. The other side on the bridge, of course, the Americans pushed forward, trying to make crossings where there's boats. And, of course, at the bridge, they were unsuccessful, took considerable casualties as well. But so did the Germans. They did lose some of their dug-in markers, and take losses as well. And we'll get a look at that as well. But the main story is right here in the center. As you can see where all those smoke markers are, they did defeat the single company of infantry that was located here. They were destroyed. Good dice rolling, too. Also, I believe they used their artillery support on this position as well. I don't recall. They used it somewhere. But regardless, they took the position, threw the Germans off of that location. Right there in the center, you can see Stuart, supported by some Shermans. They also defeated 2 companies of Stugs, pushed them back and forced them to retreat. There currently is those Stugs. They're both 2 hits each, 1 more, and they are destroyed. In addition, up here you can see the 3rd assault gun company that was also thrown back. He was originally up in this location, right there, and he was going off against 3 M4 tank companies, so he didn't last long. In fact, I think he used the withdraw tactic and pulled himself right out of that situation. So the Germans are really reeling with their armor in this sector. I mean, all their Stugs are basically 2 hits apiece, 1 more, and they are destroyed. See if the Germans can recoup those troops in the future turn. And now let's go over on the other side. Of course, here's looking at the other sector here where the other Kampfgruppe is organized to defend the riverside. As you can see, the Americans basically didn't make any headway. They did come across 3 companies of infantry with these boats, but they were forced back with some losses. They did take away one of the earthworks that was placed here. Both these units are looking a little bit ragged. Each has taken a hit. Over here, untouched by the bridge. Again, 3 companies of infantry come ripping across and only managed to take away the earthworks, these German defenders. And also on the far side over here, 3 more companies of infantry. These are all armored infantry, by the way, if you remember. Were also repulsed, coming across with the boats, and they retreated with 1 loss. And again, the Germans lost their earthworks and have also taken a hit on this company. So they are well supported, however. As you can see, there is a Stug supporting that Kampfgruppe. We'll see if they can help out as well. Before we go to the next turn, let's take a look at the rear area of the Germans. Of course, they have their armored element in the back in reserve, if you remember. You can see over there, they're still holding out pretty well. They got their motorized battalion as well as 2 companies of Panther tanks and the Nebelwerfers, which are located here. They basically move forward a little bit, get in range. They have a range of 3 squares only, which will kind of put them in range of these frontline battles going on. But more importantly, over here you can see the 1st Kampfgruppe element of infantry, their support element, which was the battalion of Stugs or assault guns, have withdrawn, and this is their current position. They are tipped, could take no more actions, and they've all taken 2 hits apiece. Of course, here's a battalion of Panzer Grenadiers, some of which are in fortifications, as well as one of the companies of Panthers in support around this objective the Americans are obviously heading toward, as you can see. We'll see if they can launch a counterattack and prevent the advancing of these Americans. We'll also see if the Germans can evacuate those lead objectives, because the next turn, that's when the first one will be removed, up in this area here. That objective will be removed from the battlefield the next turn. So that's a look at the back positions of the Germans. All right, folks, the Germans have finished their turn. There was a brutal battle here in the middle. There was a counterattack launched by the Germans, and they seized an opportunity, seeing how the extended tanks of the Americans might be cut off in their next turn. And indeed they are at the moment. They did launch a counterattack here via their 2 Panzer Grenadier companies as supported by a Panther company. They were successful. They destroyed a Sherman and a Stuart, indicated by these smoke markers. They each took a casualty hit, as you can see. In addition, one of the Shermans, as you can see right there, was forced to vacate that square and is now located here. It is tipped and has taken 2 hits. It was a brutal fight. The Germans are quite successful there. However, up in the center there, 2 assault guns did manage to attack a lone M10, which is still there. The M10, or actually the M18, I got to remember, these are all M18s. The M18 did take a hit. The assault guns also took a hit. Both of those assault guns have hits on them. This one has 2, this one has 1. So they are tipped as well. They had to retreat from the attack. But the main goal here for the Germans was to try and isolate these forward tanks. And not only do that, but actually cause some harm to some of those tanks. And they did just that. They were supported, as you can see, by the Nebelwerfer in the back here, which is currently tipped because it supported that assault on the American tanks. The Germans have also moved up some of their reinforcements. There you see an additional Panther moved up. In addition, you can't really see them, but there is motorized infantry moving up in this direction. One is located in this wood down here, and on the other side of this big tree there is another Panther company. So they've moved up just on the edge of this mountain range. There was nothing done on the other side by the river, and down here, as you can see, there goes a half-track carrying away an objective marker. That marker was removed at the end of the German turn. The Americans failed to capture it, and it's removed at the end of turn 4. These German troops up here, these leg infantry, are still holding their position. They're taking a beating. The only one without any damage, well, actually there's 2 companies. This one here has no damage, and there's one over here behind that yellow tree. You can't see him, but he's also fresh. So the Americans are kind of stymied on this side. They haven't really made much headway except cause some casualties. They were not able to secure that objective. The tanks are whipping around in an attempt to isolate that position with the Germans, and it backfired. The Germans have now isolated all these tanks, and the Americans are up first. Let's see how they reply to this counterattack by the Germans. Turn 5 is next. All right, folks, finished turn 5 for the Americans. Pretty exciting stuff. The Americans, in an attempt to alleviate all the isolated units up here, the tank units, they did launch an attack from this area into this square where there was 2 tipped Stug units. And it was a pretty heavy battle. It was 3 tanks against 2, basically, with support from the N7 Priest, providing some barrage strength. Germans put up a fight, though. They used some tactics of their own. It was to no avail. Both units of the assault guns were destroyed. The Germans were defeated, and that position was secured. There was also fights over here. As you can see, there was a little bit of fight there. You can see the smoke. The Americans were repulsed in that case. The Germans are putting up a hard fight there as well. And if you look all the way over there, all along the river area, the Americans also assaulted. They took this position, and they took across the bridge. And the reason they got this is they played an event that forced the German unit that was here with no breastworks to make a road move back. And he's now located somewhere back in here. Oh, there he is. He's down here. I don't know if you could see him. But he's tipped as well. So that unit was taken out of the fight, leaving this open. During the tactical phase, the Americans swarmed across the bridge, secured it, got some backup with some tanks to cross in future turns, and they were able to attack this position, forcing this German unit to withdraw back to its assault battery unit in support. So the Germans have lost all along the front except this one little spot. That unit is in breastworks, and they're the only defenders left along this bridge line. Now for the Germans, their only forward position is right here. They have some Panzer Grenadiers supported by one of their Panther tank battalions. Not battalion, but company. They're holding there. They still have some leg infantry defending in this area here. They have one objective which will be removed in turn 12, which is located up here. It is defended by a company of infantry here, as well as next to it in these two squares. The Germans still have troops back here in this zone. It looks like the Americans are keen on moving towards this direction if they can get past the more elite Panzer Grenadiers. But this position here is well fortified. There is troops back here. This battery of artillery, Nebelwerfers, should be in this square actually. He's tipped as well. Actually, no, he's not tipped. So he'll be usable in the next turn for the Germans. So the Germans do have some support back here to defend this position and possibly reinforce. We'll see what happens. So that's turn 5. We're going into turn 6, which is the Germans. Hang in there, folks. It's getting good. All right, we're going to jump ahead a few turns. Let's start over on this side. If you remember, the Germans are up here holding this objective, which is now gone. It vacated. It is safe and sound from the Americans. So the troops that were up here, the infantry Kampfgruppe that was up here, did manage to pull itself back, avoid total isolation, which it suffered from early on, and is now located down here next to this village. So they did a fighting withdrawal. They had to fight some combats to get to this point, but they're all located in this area. They have one unit up here, kind of supporting that Panther in the fields. That's their current location, so they withdrew effectively. So far, their losses in the battle are just one company of infantry. And you can see the Americans advancing slowly. This infantry element is advancing slowly. They were unable to secure that objective earlier, if you remember. Also up here, there was a brutal back-and-forth fight here between the Panther and the armored Panzer Grenadiers in this area right here. It was back and forth. The Americans launched an attack after the Germans launched an attack on the tanks, and it was back and forth. And currently, this is the situation. The Americans have suffered quite a few losses. As you can see, they've each suffered 2 hits, one away from being wiped out and shattered. The Germans, on the other hand, they have withdrawn. They have kind of taken a beating themselves. They have one of their Panthers here, one of their Panthers here tipped, and some infantry back here that are also tipped. They were in this fight up here in the last turn, which was turn 8, and they finally withdrew from the fight. But the Americans are also tipped. Now, turn 9 is next. I played the past 3 turns. These guys will become untipped, but they are pretty much worn. They've taken a lot of losses and disruption in their formations, so I don't think the Americans are going to do much with them. If we take a look at the German defenses down here, this objective right here, this is the next objective to go, and I'll get to this in a minute. There is quite a few troops here, including the elite Panzer Grenadiers. There's 2 companies there. Plenty of earthworks, fortifications in this square. And I'm also, with the Germans, building another earthwork, as you can see here. Unfortunately, they were not able to forward this engineer marker beyond 1. It has to go through 4 turns before it can flip and become a marker proper. So we'll see if that even stays there. I'll have to double check when this is removed. We're just at the end of turn 8. So I think this is gone in 16. It couldn't be 16. That's the end of the game. But I will double check this. I think it's turn 12, actually, that this will be removed. So yeah, the armored Kampfgruppe is mostly located here. They do have the motorized infantry and Panther, another Panther company over on the other side there. which I will show off in a second. So another thing to keep in mind is that the Americans did, for the most part, break through. They have quite a few troops here in these squares back here, and also, as you can see them perched up on the mountains there, they have 3 companies of Shermans up in the mountains trying to make a crossing. As you can see, the Germans are kind of answering to that. So this is the situation. Here, the American infantry is coming up from behind them. The spearhead is by the tanks. They got quite a few tanks, but they've taken a beating. It's going to be a tough fight if they go up against this defensive force here that the Germans are building up. This is going to be a rough objective for the Americans to take. It's going to be a brutal fight. It's going to take everything they have. Now let's take a look at the other side. Here on the other side, you can see the Americans have pretty much fully crossed. And if you remember back in the earlier turns, that all happened because the one infantry company that was here defending the German was forced to move all the way back with the road move, all the way up into this area here into the woods. The Americans played an event that allowed that to happen. So it left this square totally undefended. The Americans just moved right in and began attacking. Unfortunately, they were unable to put a lot of pressure on this objective square. As you can see, the white marker is now gone because you can see it's making its escape in the half track. So that's just a marker for me. But yeah, this objective has been vacated at the end of turn 8. The Americans were unable to launch an effective attack against that objective area. So that is that. They did not capture it. In the meantime, the Americans, you can see a lot of them are tipped. They have a strong force over here. They need to get moving forward. They don't have a heck of a lot. The German the second infantry element up here is begun to withdraw from these positions, in fact, anticipating defending the supply marker, perhaps. As you can see, that supply marker is actually down here. Right there. They have to protect that, that's for sure. So that's the situation on this side. The Americans are up in the mountains. I don't know what they're going to do with those guys. We're just going to have to see what they decide to do with them. But all in all, that's the situation. The Germans are proving to be pretty tough in this scenario. That's all I can say. Okay, folks, we're going to go to the next turn, which is turn 9. 16 is the base number of turns. And we're going to see if the Americans can capture 3 objectives. There's only 1, 2, 3 left. Okay, folks, Americans are up next. All right, folks, we're at turn 10. This is the conclusion of the German turn. The Americans made an all-out push at this objective. Right down here, which was protected by what's left of the Panzer Grenadiers. Unfortunately, they were unable to take it. The only troops available was a battalion worth of armored troops from the armored element. They attacked from this direction, and they were repulsed, unfortunately. They threw everything they had into that attack. They didn't have many OPs to do it with. I think they played 3 tactics, which they were eligible to do with 3 units, and still they were not able to do it. Also, the M7 from this element also joined in and put down some barrage. The Germans held out. I think the Germans suffered 2 losses, 3 losses actually. They did have some fortifications here, which were absorbed one of the hits, the first hit, and the rest were taken by the other 2 units. So each of these 3 companies of Panzer Grenadiers now is at 2 hits apiece. They're almost shattered. They're definitely worn. But they held on to it in turn 9. Now, this was a critical turn for the Americans. If they couldn't take this objective, it would be removed at the end of turn 10, which is the German turn, which we did. There was also some limited attacks up here in the fields. Right in here, you could just barely see it. Let me get the camera turned in there. Get a little more of the battlefield. The Americans also put some hurt down here with 3 more M10s. Actually, these are M18s. I'm using M10 models. There is no M10s in this battle. They're all M18s. Far superior tank destroyer. But anyway, they did manage to take out this Panther company. They are gone from the battle, and the leg infantry of German infantry withdrew into this square. So this square here, this built-up area, is now occupied by 3 companies of leg infantry from that same element. So they did have some success here, but it was all for nothing, honestly. On the other side, you can see the Americans have battalion worth of Shermans up here that penetrated deep from the mountain area. If you remember, they were coming from the mountains there. They were able to get down in there, attack a lone company of infantry, and take them out. Those infantry are now withdrawn into this built-up area over here. You can barely see them. They are in some fortifications as well. They have 2 hits on them, so 1 more and they are gone. But they are wide open. The Germans are wide open to being attacked here. Their supply is threatened. As well as this objective back here. As you can see, there is a second objective here and a third one up here in this built-up area. But unfortunately, the Americans could not capture this objective, and this was crucial to the battle. There's only 3 objectives remaining. And in order to win, the Americans need to capture 3 of those objectives. Well, this objective will be removed at the end of turn 10. That means there's only going to be 2 objectives remaining in the battlefield. The Americans cannot win at this point. So they would pull their troops back, call the attack off. The remaining Germans would then evacuate from the battlefield. And that's about it right there. That objective will be, actually it is, it's removed. As I said, we finished turn 10 for the Germans. So this objective is actually removed. I didn't roll for the fortifications there. It's moot at this point. The Americans also had some success on the other side of the woods there, up by the river. Let's take a look at that. Guys crossed all the way from the river over there, mostly across this bridge. They did not take this objective, but they did manage to move forward here, pushing back this Panther company and these motorized infantry back. This unit actually evaded after fighting a little battle with these guys. You could see the smoke where the battle took place. They evaded and were able to remove one of the hits they took, so they only have 1. The Americans also secured this position, forced the Germans back into the woods. These Germans have, this one has 2, the other one over there has 1 hit. These guys were untouched, but they're in a position of being encircled and isolated at this point. So it's kind of dangerous for the Germans at this point, because they are kind of getting their supply route in trouble. So, but again, that's all moot. The battle is concluded at this point, simply because that one objective could not be taken. Again, it was removed. So there you go, folks. That's the battle. It was really enjoyable, but I hope you enjoyed. Take care, my friends. So there you go, folks. That's my battle report using Rommel by Sam Mustafa, Honor Games. Really fun game. I always have a good time playing this. It's different. It really gives you a bigger picture look and feel to your battles. Moving around battalions and stuff, and you get divisional sized engagements. Fantastic, good fun. I hope you enjoyed. I hope to do more battle reports in the future. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let me know your thoughts about this fantastic set of rules, Rommel. See you next time, folks, for another BatRep soon. Take care.